Our guest this afternoon is currently in her 8th season as a member of the acting company at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, where her roles have included Cordelia in King Lear, Aquarius in Daughters of the Revolution, Elma Duckworth in Bus Stop, Miranda in The Tempest, Perdita in The Winter's Tale, the Tigress in Tracy's Tiger, Jane Bennett in Pride and Prejudice, and Lady Mortimer in Henry IV Part 1. Last year she played Louison in The Imaginary Invalid and Dal Tersheet in Henry IV Part 2. During her career, she has also appeared at Milwaukee Repertory Theater, Cincinnati Playhouse in the Park, Los Angeles Women's Shakespeare Company, the Boston Court Theater, and the Actors Theater of Louisville. Locally, she has performed at the Rogue Music Theater, Signet Theater Group of Ashland, and Ashland New Plays Festival. This year on the OSF stage, in addition to playing Portia, one of the ugly stepsisters in Medea Macbeth's Cinderella, she delivered a transcendent performance as Nina in Seagull, a performance which was at once stirring and poignant. Next year, she will take on the daunting task of playing both Kate in The Taming of the Shrew and Stella in A Streetcar Named Desire. Yeah. She grew up here in Ashland. She is the daughter of the actors Annette O'Toole and Bill Geisslinger and the stepdaughter of the actor Michael McKean. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Nell Geisslinger. Well, I didn't make anything up. Oh, I want to talk at the beginning. You started at OSF as an intern in 2002.
I did.
And you played smaller roles for a few years until 2005, and then you left and came back in 2007 when you returned and did Miranda in Tempest and The Tigress. What were you doing while you were gone?
I was gone in 2005 for just a year,
Okay.
And that year I was traveling across the country with my boyfriend at the time. I lived in Ted and Teresa. I lived in Elko, Nevada for a couple of months, and I poured beer and made pizzas, which was actually great experience because I came back the next year and played Elma in Bus Stop. So, and I needed some bona fide waitressing experience, and I certainly got it, and a very interesting clientele at the Pizza Barn in Elko, Nevada. And then I lived in Sarasota, Florida. My boyfriend at the time was going to graduate school at the Oslo Conservatory in Sarasota. So I lived there, and again, I worked as a cocktail waitress, and I did some volunteer work, and I was mostly a pseudo housewife type for a couple of months there. And then I came back and I got my equity card. Libby gave me my equity card, and I did Bus Stop and The Tempest that next year.
Right.
Or not The Tempest, sorry. What was it next year? Tracy's Tiger.
Tracy's Tiger
Sorry.
and The Tempest. Yeah.
I don't even know my own biography.
Well, those are both what I would call substantial and serious roles, pivotal roles. What was it like at that age, at that stage in your career, to take on those that kind of upfront, important type roles for you?
Gosh, it was really exciting for me. I had been at the festival already then for a couple of seasons, and having that year off to think about, was the theater really the place that I wanted to be? Is it something I really wanted to invest my time in? And I felt like to come back into the theater, I really needed to step it up a notch, and Libby gave me that opportunity. So it was, of course, I was 22 at the time, and I felt I was way too old to be playing Elma. It was like 15 or 16. But that's sort of the way it is, You end up playing characters. This year I was, Nina, I think, is probably, but she goes from like 17 to 19 maybe, or 20. So you're always playing characters that are younger than you are. That's just pretty typical on the Oregon Shakespeare Festival stage. But yeah, it was exciting, and Tracy's Tiger was great because I hadn't been involved in a musical for many years, and that's a place where that's a place where my heart really lives. I grew up doing musicals, and my mother comes from a very musical tradition. My grandmother and her sister owned a tap and Shiketti ballet school in Houston, Texas, and my mom was in Los Angeles in the 1960s doing all kinds of musicals, and so it was wonderful. It was an exciting year.
You then left for another couple of years.
I did.
And the question I want to ask about that, not so much, I know what you did because you were doing some acting at that point in different places. How important is it for a young actor to get varied experiences, to move around and take not just different roles, but be in different places?
Gosh, I think it's extremely important, and I'm probably one of the only one of a few select group of young actors in the country who hasn't had that be the typical experience. The Oregon Shakespeare Festival has been my artistic home, and I've spent a lot of time feeling the gravitational pull of Ashland and OSF. A lot of people base themselves out of New York or Los Angeles or Chicago and find themselves on the road a lot, going out to do regional theater gigs and rarely being in a place that they would call home. That's a more typical experience. But so I think it's very important. And you know, it's so wonderful to establish relationships with people here, that you work with people over years and you get to know people so well. But what are you missing out there in the rest of the world? There's so many amazing theater artists in this country, and sometimes you have to leave OSF to collaborate with them because they don't always want to come here for 10 months out of the year. Yeah.
I want to talk, I'm going to jump around chronologically with you a little bit, because I think this is a question that came up for me as soon as I heard what you're carrying next year. Kate in Taming of the Shrew, Stella in Streetcar Named Desire. These are two roles that have somewhat major societal or cultural, if not political, significance in America and perceptions in the history of theater. I'm thinking specifically of the way they figure in discussions about women's rights, feminism. How does that enter into the way you're going to approach these roles, or the way you've been thinking about these roles?
Well, hopefully it won't affect me too much. You know, like you say, the nature of these plays and these roles, it's just, by nature, they can be incendiary. And everybody comes to the table, everybody comes to sit in the audience with a really different history and response to those plays and those roles. And I can't factor that into what I choose to do on stage. That's death to the artist, is when you start, you know, trying to give a performance that appeals to everybody, or that really like satisfies women, like the people who are going to be there, who are really upset about the fact that Kate's last line is, "Put my hand under my husband's foot." You know, how you can't, you're never going to be able to answer their questions for them to their satisfaction, because what's on the page is what's on the page. So David Ivers, who's the director of Taming of the Shrew, and I have already talked about just going in there and trying to do what's written and have it make sense to us, the artists that we are. So what's on the page filtered through Nell Geisslinger, the actor, and what my tastes are, what my response is to the play and to that character. And I'm in such the beginning stages of it. I have no idea where the next 2 months of research are going to take me, but
well,
exciting.
In your mind, do these two characters, and I know you're only thinking about them now, although obviously you're familiar with them, do these two characters have a conversation? Is there something connecting them to, and what is that for you?
Well, absolutely, and I think everybody will see that. And sometimes on the same day, I'll be playing Stella or Kate in the afternoon and the other part at night, which will be, it's a little bit daunting.
I said that.
Yeah. I have to go through and mark on my calendar what days those are and make sure that I eat and sleep appropriately the night before. Yeah, I mean, of course there's going to be a conversation. I think some people would argue that there are more similarities than differences between those women. I'm not sure how I feel about that yet. It'll depend on how I choose to play them. And I have a feeling that that's one of the reasons I was cast. They wanted to cast the same actress in both of those roles, certainly, so that that conversation is strengthened. And then for me as an actor, that's in terms of a repertory, that's a great gift, you know, because how much of the differences do I want to highlight between those women? How much of the things that make them completely separate people and like totally unrecognizable? All of that has to be taken into consideration in the rep situation.
We're safe in assuming Kate's not going to have a Southern accent, though, I take it.
She's probably not going to have she doesn't come from Belle Reeve. So yes, that will be different. It's just, that play is set in very like a rockabilly boardwalk type scenario. If you think of Coney Island, it's not Coney Island, it's like an Italian version of Coney Island is where we're setting it. And then of course the streetcar, it is what it is on the page. We're in New Orleans. Yeah. Can you all hear me, by the way? Is anybody
having?
Right? Okay.
It's good? All right.
Oh, good.
I told her to use her Boehmer voice, not her Elizabethan voice.
There's a big difference.
Yeah. Now, both of your parents are actors, so you grew up in what I think you described as a performance family, was the phrase I had in my notes. At one point, I think this led you to study dance to the exclusion of acting.
It did.
And I'm curious, how does that part of your background inform your acting today?
I think that I typically tend to approach a character with a lot of awareness about physical choices. I mean, the imaginary invalid is a good example because it was so exaggerated. But, hi, Fred and Norma. I can see all these bright faces out there I love, and it's so nice to see you.